You think you're intelligent because you can solve problems, remember facts, or win arguments. But what if I told you that true intelligence has nothing to do with how much you know? What if the smartest person in the room is the one you never even noticed? The one who controls the game, while you're still trying to figure out the rules. Machiavelli understood something most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. Intelligence isn't about being right. It's about being effective. And there are 7 distinct levels to this hierarchy, 7 layers of cognitive evolution that separate the powerful from the powerless, the player from the played. Most people never make it past level 3. Most people die at level 2. The question isn't whether you're intelligent. The question is, at which level are you currently operating? And more importantly, are you even aware of it? Level 1 is where almost everyone begins. This is the realm of reactive intelligence. You respond to stimuli. Someone insults you, you get angry. Someone praises you, you feel validated. Your emotions are puppeteered by external forces you don't even recognize as strings. At this level, you believe your thoughts are your own, but they're really just echoes of your environment, your parents, your culture, your social media feed. You think you're making choices, but you're running on programming installed before you were old enough to question it. The person at level 1 lives in a constant state of defensiveness, because their entire identity is built on sand, on borrowed beliefs they've never examined. They argue for positions they don't understand. They repeat phrases they've heard without knowing where they came from. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he wasn't writing for level 1 minds. He knew they were beyond help, too busy drowning in their own unconsciousness to ever grab the rope. The tragedy of level 1 is that these people often feel the most certain. They mistake their conditioning for conviction. They confuse their reflexes for reason. And because everyone around them operates at the same frequency, they never realize they're trapped in a cage made of consensus reality. But then something happens. A crisis, a betrayal, a moment of such profound disillusionment that the machinery breaks down. And, if you're fortunate, if you have even a spark of genuine curiosity, you climb to level 2. This is analytical intelligence. You start asking questions. You read books. You discover logic, philosophy, science. You feel intellectually superior to the masses because now you can deconstruct arguments, spot logical fallacies, debate with facts and data. This is where most educated people plateau and mistake the plateau for the peak. Level 2 is seductive because it gives you the illusion of mastery. You think understanding how something works means you control it. You memorize frameworks, quote dead philosophers, collect degrees and certifications like badges of honor. But here's what Machiavelli knew that you don't. Knowledge without application is just expensive entertainment. You can know everything about human psychology and still get manipulated daily. You can understand game theory and still lose every game you play. Level 2 is the graveyard of potential, filled with brilliant minds who never translated their intelligence into power because they were too busy being right to be effective. They write dissertations nobody reads. They win arguments nobody cares about. They die with their minds full and their lives empty. The person at level 2 mistakes the map for the territory. They think because they can describe the current means they understand the ocean. And this is where most people get stuck, endlessly cycling between reactive emotion and analytical paralysis, between feeling and thinking, never quite bridging the gap. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Some people make the jump to level 3, and this is where things get interesting. This is tactical intelligence. You stop just analyzing the world and start gaming it. You recognize patterns in human behavior and learn to exploit them. You understand that people are predictable, that they run on scripts, that with the right stimulus you can elicit the response you want. This is the domain of the successful salesman, the charismatic politician, the master seducer. You've learned that emotions are tools, that vulnerability can be weaponized, that people don't want truth, they want validation wrapped in the language of their existing beliefs. At level 3, you become dangerous in small domains. You can manipulate a conversation, a transaction, a relationship. You read Robert Greene and think you've discovered the cheat codes to reality. You practice dark psychology like it's a martial art. You test techniques on friends and strangers and feel a rush of power when they work. But level 3 has a fatal flaw that Machiavelli understood intimately. Tactics without strategy is just noise before defeat. You can win 100 small battles and still lose the war. You can manipulate individuals while completely misreading the larger systems that govern your life. The level 3 operator is like a chess player who's mastered the openings but has no endgame. They're so focused on the immediate win, the short-term gain, the quick dopamine hit of outsmarting someone, that they build nothing lasting. They make enemies unnecessarily. They burn bridges for small victories. They optimize for today and sabotage tomorrow. This is the realm where most self-proclaimed dark psychology enthusiasts live, drunk on their own cleverness, completely unaware that they're still playing a game designed by people operating at higher levels. They think they're Machiavellian because they lied successfully or manipulated someone into bed or negotiated a better salary. But Machiavelli wasn't writing about tricks. He was writing about power structures, about the architecture of control that operates whether you're aware of it or not. And to access that, you need to climb higher. Level 4 is strategic intelligence. This is where you zoom out. You stop optimizing for individual interactions and start designing systems. You recognize that true power isn't about controlling people. It's about controlling environments, incentive structures, the rules of the game itself. At level 4, you understand that the most effective manipulation is the kind that doesn't feel like manipulation at all. You don't convince people, you architect situations where they convince themselves. You don't fight resistance, you make your desired outcome the path of least resistance. Machiavelli operated here. He understood that a prince doesn't need to be loved or feared in every individual moment. He needs to construct a political reality where his power is self-reinforcing, where the system itself deters threats and rewards loyalty without his constant intervention. The level 4 mind thinks in second and third-order consequences. They ask not just, "What will happen if I do this?" but, "What will people do in response to what happens? And what will I do in response to that?" They play chess while others play checkers. They build institutions while others build networks. But even this isn't the peak, because strategic intelligence still operates within existing frameworks, within the rules as they currently exist. You're still playing the game, even if you're playing it better than most. But what if you could change the game itself? Level 5 is meta-intelligence. This is the ability to step outside the system and see the system itself as an object that can be redesigned. You recognize that the rules everyone takes for granted are just agreements, often unconscious ones, and agreements can be renegotiated. At level 5, you don't just navigate culture, you shape it. You don't just respond to narratives, you author them. This is where the true architects of reality operate. The people who don't just win elections, but redefine what politics means. The entrepreneurs who don't just build companies, but create entirely new markets. The artists who don't just make popular work, but shift the aesthetic paradigm so future popular work follows their template. Machiavelli himself was a level 5 operator. He didn't just advise princes. He wrote a book that changed how power itself was understood for the next 5 centuries. He stepped outside the moral framework of his time and described power nakedly, clinically, without the comforting illusions everyone else wrapped around it. And in doing so, he gave birth to modern political science. He changed the game by revealing the game. But even Machiavelli had limits. Even he operated within certain fundamental assumptions about human nature, about what power is for, about the inevitability of conflict and competition. And this brings us to a level that very few even know exists. Level 6 is transcendent intelligence. This is the ability to hold multiple, contradictory frameworks simultaneously and move fluidly between them. You recognize that there is no single, correct way to view reality. Every framework, every ideology, every system of thought is a lens that reveals certain truths while obscuring others. At level 6, you become framework agnostic. You can think like a capitalist when it's useful, like a socialist when that serves you, like a mystic or a scientist or a nihilist. Not because you believe any of these things absolutely, but because you recognize them as tools in a larger toolkit. You understand something most people never grasp. The map is never the territory, but you need maps to navigate. So you collect maps, you build maps, you discard maps when they stop being useful. You're not attached to being right. You're committed to being effective, and you know that effectiveness requires radical flexibility. This is where you find the true polymaths, the Renaissance minds, the people who can speak the language of any domain they enter because they understand that all languages are just different ways of pointing at the same underlying reality. But here's what makes level 6 terrifying and lonely. You can no longer participate authentically in the consensus reality that comforts everyone else. You see through everything, which means you can't unsee. You recognize the game in every interaction, the performance in every personality, the construction in every identity. And while this gives you tremendous freedom, It also isolates you. Because how do you connect with people who are still convinced their scripts are their souls? But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we still haven't touched. There's a seventh level that almost no one reaches because it requires something most people aren't willing to do. It requires you to integrate everything we've discussed and then surrender it. Level 7 is embodied intelligence. This is where you transcend the need to be clever. You've mastered analysis, tactics, strategy, meta, thinking, framework, fluidity, and now you let it all go. Not because you've forgotten it, but because it's become so deeply integrated that it operates automatically, unconsciously, effortlessly. At level 7, you're no longer thinking your way through interactions. You're not running calculations or modeling scenarios. You're simply present, and from that presence, you act with a precision that looks like magic to everyone else. Your intelligence has become intuitive, somatic, embedded in your nervous system, rather than your conscious mind. This is the realm of the master martial artist, who doesn't think about technique anymore. He is the technique. The jazz musician, who doesn't think about the scales. She is the music. The surgeon, whose hands know what to do before his mind can articulate it. In the domain of power and influence, level 7 is the person who walks into a room and changes the energy without saying a word. Who negotiates without negotiating, who leads without announcing leadership, who shapes reality through their mere presence because they've become so aligned with the deeper currents of human nature that they don't resist them or manipulate them. They flow with them. Machiavelli pointed toward this, but never quite named it. He understood that the greatest princes weren't the ones who studied power most carefully, but the ones who embodied it so naturally that their authority was unquestionable. They didn't need to constantly prove themselves because their legitimacy wasn't intellectual. It was existential. But here's the paradox. You cannot reach level 7 by trying to reach level 7. The moment you grasp for this state, you've fallen back into level 3 tactical manipulation. Level 7 can only emerge through the complete mastery and subsequent surrender of all previous levels. You have to become so intelligent that you can afford to stop thinking. You have to gain so much power that you can afford to stop controlling. And most people never get here because they can't tolerate the vulnerability it requires. Because true power, ultimate intelligence, looks a lot like not having power at all. It looks like simplicity, presence, ease, and everyone still climbing the ladder mistakes this for weakness. So where do you rank? And more importantly, do you have the courage to be honest about it? Because here's what most people do. They read something like this and immediately place themselves at level 5 or 6. It's a psychological defense mechanism. You don't want to admit you're at level 1 or 2 because that would shatter your self-image. But self-deception is the surest sign you're exactly where you don't want to be. The person at level 1 doesn't know they're at level 1. They think they're enlightened because they watched some videos and had some feelings. The person at level 2 doesn't know they're at level 2. They think their ability to analyze makes them superior. Even the person at level 3 often believes they're at level 6 because they've learned to manipulate a few social dynamics, and they mistake that for mastery. Real intelligence requires real humility. It requires you to look at yourself with the same cold, clinical precision that Machiavelli looked at power. No comforting narratives, no excuses, no blame, just assessment. Where am I actually operating from? Not where I want to be. Not where I tell people I am. Where am I right now, today? In how I actually move through the world. And once you've answered that honestly, the next question is harder. Am I willing to do what it takes to evolve? Because evolution is painful. Moving from level 1 to level 2 requires shattering your comfortable illusions. Moving from level 2 to level 3 requires risking failure, trying things that might not work, looking foolish. Moving from level 3 to level 4 requires patience, long-term thinking, delayed gratification in a world that rewards immediate results. Moving from level 4 to level 5 requires intellectual courage, the willingness to question everything, including the frameworks you've built your success on. Moving from level 5 to level 6 requires holding paradox, sitting in ambiguity, releasing the need for certainty. And moving from level 6 to level 7 requires surrender, which feels like death to the ego that got you to level 6. Most people quit. They find a level that's comfortable, that gives them enough of an edge to feel superior, and they stop. They plateau. They spend the rest of their lives defending that plateau as if it were the summit. And they die, never knowing what they could have become. Machiavelli wrote, "The prince, not because he thought everyone could become a prince. He knew most people were sheep, and sheep nature doesn't change. He wrote it for the few who had the capacity to see power clearly, to use it effectively, to shape history rather than be shaped by it. He wrote it for the ones who wouldn't flinch when he stripped away the moral pretense and showed them what leadership actually requires. Are you one of those few? Or are you just someone who likes the aesthetic of being Machiavellian without doing the work? Because there's a difference between reading about power and acquiring it. There's a difference between understanding these levels intellectually and actually climbing them. Talk is cheap. Analysis is easy. Transformation is rare. And the world is designed to keep you comfortable, to keep you at whatever level you're already at, because people who evolve become dangerous, unpredictable, harder to control. Every system wants stasis. Every hierarchy wants you to accept your place in it. Moving up requires you to betray the social contracts that kept you safe, to risk the relationships that validated your current identity, to walk away from communities that will call you arrogant or cold or manipulative for refusing to stay small. But here's what they won't tell you. The loneliness of evolution is temporary. Once you reach higher levels, you find the others who climbed the same mountain. You find the people operating at your frequency. And the connection you build there is deeper than anything you left behind, because it's based on reality, not illusion. It's based on mutual respect for the journey, not shared delusion about the destination. The people at level 6 and 7 don't need to convince each other of anything. They recognize each other instantly. There's a signal, a resonance, a way of seeing that can't be faked. And when you find your people, when you find the ones who've done the work, the ones who've paid the price, the ones who've climbed out of the cave, you realize the loneliness was worth it, because you're finally home. Not in a place, but in a state of being. And from that state, you can create anything. You can shape reality. You can play the game at a level that most people don't even know exists. But you have to start. You have to be honest. You have to assess yourself without mercy and commit to the climb without guarantee. So I'll ask you one more time, where do you rank? Not where you want to rank. Not where you think you should rank. Where are you actually operating from in this moment, right now, as you hear these words? And whatever level that is, are you willing to do what's necessary to evolve beyond it? Because the only thing more tragic than never climbing is stopping halfway and pretending you've reached the top. The only thing more pathetic than unconsciousness is false consciousness. The belief that you're awake when you're still dreaming. Machiavelli knew this. He knew that most people would read his work and miss the point entirely. They'd take the tactics and ignore the strategy. They'd embrace the cynicism and miss the deeper pattern recognition. They'd think being Machiavellian meant being cruel, when it actually means being clear. Clear about power, clear about human nature, clear about what works versus what you wish would work. And that clarity, that willingness to see reality without the comforting filter of ought and should, that's where real intelligence begins, not in knowing more, but in seeing more accurately. Not in being smarter, but in being less deluded. So here's your call to action, and it's not to like or subscribe or share, though you can do those things if you want. Your real call to action is this: stop lying to yourself. Stop performing intelligence and start embodying it. Stop collecting concepts and start implementing them. Pick one level above where you currently are and commit the next 6 months to reaching it. Not reading about it, not thinking about it, actually doing the work required to evolve. And if you don't know what that work is, that's your first assignment. Figure it out. Because nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to hand you a roadmap. The game is already being played, and every day you spend in comfortable delusion is a day someone else is climbing past you, acquiring the power you think you deserve, shaping the world you thought would wait for you to be ready. It won't wait. It never does. And when you're old and looking back at your life, you won't regret the risks you took. You'll regret the intelligence you had but never used, the potential you carried but never actualized. The levels you could have reached but were too comfortable, too afraid, or too self-deceptive to climb. You think you're intelligent because you can solve problems, remember facts, or win arguments. But now you know better, don't you?